Good evening, everyone. Hello, I'm Kim Fuller. Welcome to the HR for Health webinar, Use Them or Lose Them, How to Retain Top Talent. With dentistry experiencing full employment, it's more important than ever to retain your existing team. In this webinar, Jill Hasselman, our Director of Business Development and HR for Health, will cover the key pieces of the hiring and onboarding processes that you must do to build strong, long-lasting relationships with employees that prevent employee losses. If you guys have any questions this evening, you can put them into the Q&A section and we will get to them at the end, as many as we can. If we don't get to them, we promise we will follow up later. So I know Jill is extremely passionate about this topic, so I'm going to turn it over to her. Thank you, Jill.
Hi, everyone. It is a good time to be an employee in the medical industry right now, is it not? Our employees have tons of options when it comes to who they're working for, and it can feel like you, the practice owner or the office manager, are finding less and less suitable candidates. We hear all the time at HR for Health, I cannot find good people. I'm constantly needing to hire. What can I do? And so really, when we look at what the problem is, it's so important for us to not only hire correctly, but also to hire not to fire. And that's a lot of what we are going to be focusing on tonight, because the truth is optometry, dental, many other medical fields have been experiencing almost 100% employment, depending on where you're located, for some time now. And the curveball that COVID has brought throughout the last year really has not helped in this arena. And, if you're like a lot of the practices that we've talked to, maybe you laid off your entire team during COVID. And even though maybe you brought them back, and some of them, maybe even all of them, if you're lucky, you're now having to try to keep up with the demands of both the patients and the employees since then. And what we don't want to have to add on top of that is to always have to hire because of a retention issue. And so today we're going to discuss how to hire, not to fire, and really sprinkle in some tidbits on how to retain your team. And we want to talk about how to correctly hire. How do we go about this process? And the first step I ask of all of you is to think, are we hiring people? Are you hiring because you're having to replace employees or because you are growing? And this is an important distinction when we look into the next hour of what we're going to talk about on how to do this correctly. And so if you look at hiring of not just trying to get somebody in the door to see patients, because in my opinion, that's what a temp agency is for. If we really want to bring in good, suitable candidates, there are some specific steps that we need to take to do that. And that is to make it so that they can stay or that they want to stay, but also because there are a lot of pitfalls and risk liabilities if you aren't compliantly hiring. And a lot of practices struggle with retention because they don't realize that starting with a strong onboarding process is actually going to improve the new hire retention by 82%. And so this is the perfect time to think about, why are we hiring? Are we hiring to replace team members? And if we are, what can we do to try to give a little bit more focus on retaining them? Because again, our demand for patients is up higher than it used to be post-COVID. Things are all over the place, and that's the last thing you want to have to worry about. And so we want to go through tonight how to replace these employees. How can we learn from our mistakes, or how can we learn from the situations in the past so that our team wants to stay with us and they know what the job is going into it, and you're correctly onboarding them and hiring them so you're not just only protected, but so that you're able to keep them long term. So a little bit about HR for Health, if any of you out there are not familiar. So we are focused on helping dental and medical practices stay HR compliant. And the reality is, in the year 2021, your employees are used to a certain level of efficiency and ease of automation as they are getting as a consumer. So think about how easy it is for them to order something on Amazon, and they can rely on almost an instant result. They get full transparency of what they ordered, how much it is, are there any taxes? I can expect it within like 3 hours sometimes. And it's that instant gratification. And so the reality is that your employees, current and future, are now expecting the same experience at work as they're getting as a consumer. And that's really the first step to addressing, am I bringing in employees to an environment where they can thrive? And again, the reality is they're expecting transparency and they're expecting ease of use when it comes to working for you. And so practices that are not providing technology and systems to their team may not realize that this really does impact the employee experience and it has a significant influence on retention. And so HR for Health is focused on keeping you protected and compliant, but also giving you a way to give your employees automation, transparency, ease of use when it comes to their day-to-day HR. So what are we going to talk about today? We are going to talk about, first and foremost, how do we post for a job correctly and what should we include in that posting? We're going to talk a lot about what you should ask when you're interviewing, but also more importantly, what not to ask, so that we can check that box of recruiting in the smartest way possible and also keeping ourselves protected. Next, we're going to talk about how to extend an offer so that not just the practice, but also the employee is set up for success. And again, that we're doing this in a safe way so the practice is protected. And then last but not least, how to onboard a new hire in the best way possible so that there is that focus on retention. Couple things before we really dive into some of the material. If you've attended an HR for Health webinar before, you know that we really love giving away free resources. We know that there's a lot out there and we want to make sure you're getting it from a protected source. And so I will show this again at the end and throughout, but if you text the number 44222 and you text the word hiring tips, all one word, you will get emailed to you a list of interview questions of what you should ask versus what you should not ask. And so basically it's a way to give you information on how, if I want to learn certain information, how can I phrase that question so I'm protected and maybe still getting that information. And then the second resource that's also included in that is a list of all of the new hire documents that is required at the federal level. So if your state-specific, your state-specific documents may not be in there, so just want to give you that PSA, but the federal new hire documents are in there, and it's a great place to start to make sure you have everything you need to be set for, a great first step to make sure you're set for hiring. So a few stats that are really important for us to understand. What are we trying to combat here? Not just in terms of keeping our employees and our time that it takes to replace them, but really, what does that cost us? And the reality is that the Society for Human Resources Management, so SHRM, if any of you are familiar with that, are finding that on average, it's costing about 6 to 9 months of an employee's salary to replace him or her. So that's a lot of money. If somebody's making $60,000 a year, that's about $30,000 to $45,000 in recruiting and training costs. So that's a lot of our money that we could be losing because of this turnover issue. And there are about 54 administrative tasks to onboard a new employee, and almost $10,000 a year is wasted in ineffective onboarding in practices that we're seeing. So we have that combined with the fact that if we have the turnover, basically that $10,000 has been wasted and we have to go back to finding new people where it's costing us 6 to 9 months of that person's salary to replace them. So it can really add up. And then there's also penalties for overlooking required new hire documents. So just an I-9, which is probably the most basic first document we think of when we're hiring somebody, of what we need to give them, a missing I-9 can cost between $500 and $5,000 for the first offense. So that's a really small thing that we might not think of, but can cost a lot of money if we're not appropriately handling the I-9s, even giving them at all. So these are all things that we want to address. How do we make this easier for all of you so that you can do this in an efficient way and try to avoid, or hopefully be able to avoid, a lot of these. We can take some commas away in the thousands and thousands of dollars, maybe just like a couple hundred to try to recruit somebody if possible. So tonight we are going to do a few polls. We do want to get a good feel for where everybody's at in it that is watching. And so I'm going to pass it to Kim to do the first poll in just a sec. So Kim, whenever you're ready.
All right, awesome. This is like my favorite thing. So here we go. Here we go with our first poll. All right. Oh, sorry, I forgot to launch. There we go. How many positions have you hired for in the past 6 months? If everybody can just go ahead and, oh, we're getting responses already. I love it. We've got looking like 1 to 3 people is in the lead, but we're still only at 55% voted. So let's give everybody another minute here.
All right.
How many positions? I'm guessing probably a lot at this time.
I would think so too. If anybody answers A, they're definitely a lucky bunch.
I know. Okay. So it looks to me like we have, wow, actually 22% hired 0.
Wow.
59% hired 1 to 3. And then we do 8% at 3 to 5, 5% 5 to 7, and 5% 7 plus.
Got it. Well, that is definitely a range.
I know it is. It actually is.
Well, and again, congratulations to the 22% of you that have not had to hire anybody in the past 6 months. And I don't know if that's because you've just given up at this point because it's too hard, or because things are really moving smoothly. But yeah, I think 1 to 3 is definitely, we're seeing that as the average in the poll. I would say that that's what our clients are seeing too. And again, depending on how many you're having to hire, what I said in the beginning is really important to look at when you're looking at, why am I having to hire for these positions? And the higher the number goes up, is it because you're having to deal with retention, or is it because you're growing? Maybe you just bought a practice and so you had to hire 5 people. That's a fantastic, I wouldn't say problem, that's a fantastic hurdle to overcome, because that's building your practice versus something that might be negatively affecting it. So that's what we want to go through tonight. Awesome. So let's start with recruiting, because there are general requirements for job postings, for employment applications, salary inquiries, making sure you're paying people equally, the background check process, et cetera, et cetera. And so not only are these a lot of things to keep in mind, but there's also specific requirements at the state level versus the federal level. And so we really want to make sure that we're looking at both those pieces to make sure that you're in compliance. I will call out tonight certain things that are state specific, so you can be aware if maybe for your state you can look into that. But if you have any questions on the specifics, please reach out to our team. We would be happy to get you some more clarification on what is particular to your state. So when we're looking to recruit, we are ready. We've said, okay, we need to hire somebody, whatever the reason might be for hiring growth versus replacing a position. So the first thing we want to do is make sure we have job descriptions. We're going to develop the job descriptions, which is really going to help us to identify, what experience do I need in this role? It's also going to set those expectations for the job duties for somebody, and it's going to guide us as we're onboarding this individual, because the job description is really the basis for what they're going to be doing day to day. And we want to also include different information in this job description because of the essential functions, physical demands that we want to make sure we're addressing to protect ourselves early on. So when we look at the job posting, the most common thing that I think a lot of doctors maybe don't see initially when they're going to recruit is, we get questions all the time of, I need a good resource to post my job. This dental specific or opto specific company isn't big in my area. I know a lot of you guys use Indeed. And I think there's definitely some education around, are we actually putting out a job posting that describes what the job is? Are we really marketing ourselves to talk about, hey, this is what my practice is all about? because I definitely think there is an element of when we don't take the time to actually say this is what the job duties are, employees or potential employees don't really know what they're applying for. And so that might be why you're not getting applicants or not getting qualified applicants. And so it's really important to outline the day-to-day expectations and the job requirements. So this should include job duties, which we'll talk more about in a second, certifications and degrees required, definitely years of experience required. And, you know, you don't have to put years of experience required if you're fine hiring somebody off the street totally green, because that could also defer somebody from applying if maybe you're open to it. So those are all really important things to think about. And this is going to vary per practice based on what you guys need. Also making sure you're talking about the practice in the job posting. So just as important as job duties are, you also want to let candidates know who you are as a practice. What is your culture like? What are you valuing so that you're getting the right people to respond to that job posting? Of course, some of you are sitting there like, you probably never hired somebody, Jill. There are crazy people out there. I understand. I'm not saying this is like the one-stop shop. There are other steps we need to take besides this, but this is a great way to try to find good applicants that do resonate with the vision you're putting forth for this position and for your practice. The other thing that you absolutely must do is have all applicants fill out an employment application. Everyone needs to fill this out. This needs to be consistent across the board, and it needs to be something you're offering to every applicant. It's the first line of defense for you to protect yourself, to make sure that you are getting permission to ask certain questions, which we'll talk about in a second. But it also allows you to like screen those people pretty quickly to see, is this a good fit based on what they put on the application and based on what I have in the job posting. So everyone should fill this out. This is something you should keep on file for anybody that submits it, just to protect yourself. And this is where you get to ask questions about the candidate. So are you 18 years or older, for example? Are you legally authorized to work in the United States? You can ask for their availability. Those individual things that maybe down the road we think about later that we want to make sure we're getting up front, because if they don't have the availability, why interview them for this role if that's what's not flexible to you because you decided that when you're getting ready for the job posting of what the schedule needed to be. It's also important that you're using compliant employment applications. So this is something, this does vary state to state, but there are a lot of states and even cities that have enacted something called ban the box legislation. And what this is it prohibits employers from asking applicants if they've been convicted of a felony on initial job applications. So this refers to basically the box on the job application that they're checking, where employees or employers are asking for prospective employees whether they've been convicted of a crime. So according to the EEOC, if you reject an applicant based on a criminal conviction that has nothing to do with the job, that's not relevant to the job, or there's not another legitimate business reason, then that could be considered discrimination. So basically, if we do find that somebody has been convicted of something, that job description that we have established is really one way that we're going to reference on, is this conviction going to affect them doing the job? So for example, if somebody has been convicted of embezzling and they are applying to be in a financial coordinator role that literally says a bullet point of their duties is to handle money, valid reason. If it's for somebody who would never have any access to money, might not be as valid. So it's really important to take that stuff into consideration. If you make sure you know if you're in a state that has banned the box laws, because you need to handle those applications in a little bit of a different manner. And again, the HR for Health team, that's part of what we help with, is to make sure you're doing this correctly, and we can help you to know if you're in one of those states. But just really important to know, and if you are in a state that has banned the box laws, make sure your employment application reflects that to protect you to that accordingly, depending on if you're allowed to or not. So job descriptions. This is one of, in my opinion, the most underutilized, underestimated tool that you can bring into your practice to really get some transparency, and that communication that employees are dying to have right now in the workplace to say, hey, this is what I expect of you. And so this not only helps you to identify what the need of the role is, but also it helps to communicate clearly to a candidate and give them a first impression of what this role requires. So if you're not using job descriptions to post for jobs right now, I highly, highly recommend that you do. And we're going to talk about in just a moment, how can you do this yourself? Because it can seem like an overwhelming task to create one, but I'm going to give you the steps on how to do that. And one piece of this is if you have never done the job yourself, which can sometimes be a barrier to starting to write that job description, talk with the employees in your practice that are familiar with the ins and outs to get help with this. Because we're going to use the job descriptions for many things. We're going to use them to get good candidates to apply. We're going to use them to set expectations for that employee once you hire them. And then if we don't hire them, we also are going to use that as a basis and potentially an explanation for why you did not hire them. Because that versus the interview, which we will get to, will show if they're qualified for the job or not. But if we haven't listed out what exactly the job is, how can we prove that they're not qualified for the role? Should we ever be questioned on why we didn't hire somebody? So really, really important to have the job description. And what comes in a good job description? First, use an accurate title of what they're actually going to be doing, what is familiar to somebody that is looking for that role. Salary range and working days. So this can be fluid. Again, it's a range, and it doesn't have to be that everyone has to work on these days, but putting that up front of here's what I need in terms of availability so that they see that right from the beginning. This is also not something in terms of salary range that you necessarily have to post in the job posting if you don't want to, but I would recommend having it once you give them that job description, once you hire them. Writing a brief summary that provides an overview of the job, so really simple enough. And then defining what success looks like and what are the qualifications of this job. One thing that is definitely important to note is you want to write only the job responsibilities that are necessary for this job, not every job, unless they truly are a jack of all trades. Maybe you're a startup, they're going to do every position in the office. Maybe you could include every single responsibility under the sun, but make sure it's for this job, not every job, because when we look at essential functions, this is the most, or I would say one of the two most important things to have in a job description to protect yourself, because the essential functions are the basic job duties that an employee must be able to perform with or without reasonable accommodation. So that means that you are basically listing, I need this person to be able to do this, regardless if they have to go out on maybe disability or pregnancy leave or workers' comp. Like, this is bare minimum essential to this role. I need this to be able to be done. So when you're considering what is essential, we recommend looking at, is the reason that this position exists is to perform that function? Is the number of other employees available to perform the function? Do we have other employees that are available? Is this the sole person that can do this job and these specific tasks that I'm putting under the essential function, or can it be distributed to other people? And then the degree of expertise or skill required to perform the function. And your judgment as to which functions are essential and a written job description, so those things paired together, before advertising or interviewing, will be what the EEOC, so the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, what they will look at as evidence of essential function. So again, you can't, if somebody goes out on disability, say, oh wait, these are essential functions. We have to do it from the beginning and keep it consistent, but that's what they're going to look at. One thing I highly recommend is this can include attendance. So you can put in the essential function that they're regularly and reliably able to attend work. And this is such an important point that I think a lot of practices miss if they're trying to write their own job description, because a lot of times we think of specific tasks maybe for their individual position, but then we struggle with, oh, they keep calling out last minute. This is so frustrating. I don't feel like I can hold them accountable for it. Maybe I haven't given them that expectation that they can't do that. This is a way to do that where you say, this is absolutely an essential part of this role that you have to be able to reliably and regularly come to work. The second really important part is the physical requirements. So this should specify weight limits, for example, if they need to be able to lift at least 25 pounds, that's what you're writing out. So not just saying they have to lift stuff, really vague in general, but lift 25 pounds, much more specific. It should also specify how often an employee in that position would be expected to perform those functions. So for example, writing occasionally, frequently, 50% of the time, just nailing down a little bit more on that side. And then avoid including physical demands that are not essential to the position. And this is really important because you cannot exclude an individual with a disability and try to add that into the physical requirement if it's truly not necessarily to do the job, and they could be capable of performing all the other functions if you didn't have that in there. So again, this is something we want to be consistent on, fair, non-discriminatory, and based purely on experience and other job-related factors. So if you have any questions, the great news is HR for Health gives you job descriptions. No matter what industry you're in, no matter what position, we give you preset job descriptions. They can be customized, but we send them out to your employees to electronically sign. You can use them for job postings. If this feels a little bit overwhelming, we can just do it for you. So that's the good news. You don't have to do it yourself, but if you do, definitely follow these steps as a great step forward to do so and keep yourself protected. All right, so let's jump into the next poll. Kim, I will call back on you to run this one.
All right, here we go. Do you have a set of defined interview questions? All right, we're launching this poll. And we say, do you have a set of defined interview questions? Yes, but they could use some tweaking. Or not formal questions. I ask different questions to different people, or just straight out no. All right, people are voting furiously, and I have to say once again, there are a lot of different,
we're all over the map.
Yeah, we're all over the map for sure. They're still voting, so let's give them a minute.
Perfect.
All right, okay, I think we're gonna close it down. And here's what we've got. We have 24% said yes, 41% said yes, but they could use some tweaking, 28% said not formal, and 7% said no.
All right. That is great across the board. And, all of you, there is, if you answered A, I guess that's technically the right answer. But for all of you that answered B, C, and D, so common. There's a lot going on. How do you know? How can you keep up with the laws that are changing all the time of what you're supposed to ask or not supposed to ask? And am I going to offend somebody? And so that's probably why you're here tonight. And so let's talk about how do we go through the interview process. And this is actually, I just have the texting down at the bottom again. Another reminder, this is where you're going to get the list of what to ask versus what not to ask during the interview process. But even outside of the questions we're going to ask them, let's start right from the top. So first and foremost, you absolutely want to document the answers and notes on why you didn't pick specific candidates. And your notes should not be, I didn't pick that person because I didn't like them, or I didn't pick that person because fill in the blank of anything that could potentially get you in trouble that could be discriminatory. But truly objective reasons why you're not picking that specific candidate because of their resume, their experience based on that job description that we wrote up in step one. Next, you absolutely want to ask these same questions for consistency. We get the question a lot, do I have to ask the same questions for every position? No, you can have a set of questions for each position you're hiring for, but within that position, you absolutely want to have consistency. And then you want to probably have some questions in there about culture, values, that probably is consistent across the board, because regardless of what position they're in, we need to know that of them coming in. What you want to do here, though, when we're coming up with our questions is you want to avoid questions that are going to give too much information about anything that protects this person, puts them in a protected class. So that's disability, age, medical information, marital status. The questions that you're asking in an interview don't necessarily violate the laws themselves. You can technically ask anyone whatever you want. But the problem is when you're asking questions that could educate you about this applicant's inclusion in a protected class or lead to some other discovery that you could then inadvertently discriminate against them, that's what we want to avoid. And so if that, applicant's not hired, then they can say that was the information that was used to not hire me. It was used in a discriminatory way. And some of you listening might have had that happen to you before, and we're here to tell you it happens. Again, this is something, it's very hard to keep up on what is considered disability, what's considered old anyway. So this is where we come in to help to make sure you know. And the great thing is that we're generally hardwired to have friendly conversations. So we ask about hobbies or personal activities, or, if somebody appears pregnant, obviously, please only if it's obviously pregnant, that maybe you might say, oh, when are you due? And it might be, somebody has an interesting accent. You might be tempted to say, where are you from? But you really don't. The questions that you're asking should be related to fit of the job, history, training, experience. Can they meet my schedule? All those objective things that we've laid out of what this job requires. And so when you're developing your interview questions, here's what you want to ask yourself. You want to ask yourself, what is the purpose of each question? Is there underlying information I'm trying to get? And if so, can I ask for it directly? And last but not least, does the question provide information on the candidate's ability to complete an essential function? And if it doesn't, you probably don't need to know. So examples of what you can ask, instead of saying, do you have children? Instead, you could ask, are you able to meet the attendance requirements of this position? Instead of asking, how old are you? You can ask, are you over the age of 18? Because after that, we don't want to discriminate any older than 18. Are you religious? Instead, say, are you available on weekends? So there's ways to ask the questions, and that's, again, you can text to get that, where you're able to get the information that you're truly looking for, that doesn't ask it in a way that could get you in trouble. And I met a doctor at a trade show one time that had a pregnant applicant come in, and great interview, talked about her I don't think they talked about the pregnancy during the job interview, but had a really nice time. And he sent her an email afterwards saying, so great to meet you. And he referenced in that the fact that she was pregnant in that email. And he didn't end up hiring her for no other reason than she just, wasn't qualified, whatever it might be. But he then got a lawsuit against him for $50,000 from this woman right off the bat. And so while it might not have happened to you, it can happen. So just be really careful when it comes to making comments, documenting anything that has to do with somebody in a protected class and how you're asking these questions. And again, we give you those sample questions in that resource if you text. And one other thing to remember, while you're taking these notes for each candidate, because you're asking each person the same question, you're taking the same notes, these are the notes that if a candidate complains that they were discriminated against, that's what is going to be viewed. So make sure that you are only writing things down that you would be okay with somebody seeing in those circumstances if that was told. One last thing, salary history inquiries are, again, a state-specific thing, but many, many, many states have passed this at this point where you are not allowed to ask somebody what their current salary is during the interview process, during the application process. The reason for this is the intention behind it is to try to lower the wage gap between certain types of people, that there are trends out there that, they might make lower money at a different job. You're asking them what they were making and then you pay them that same amount. And that can create inconsistencies for maybe people in the other position. So what you can ask is, what do you expect? What would you like to make? So it may not be okay anymore to say, what is your current salary? Again, check with our team to make sure. But unless an employee voluntarily provides it, don't want to ask. What we can ask instead is, what are you expecting to make? And last but not least, phone interviews beforehand or video interviews beforehand, or even post-COVID times, even if people can come in person for the interviews, doing a phone and a video interview beforehand can really save both you and the interviewee time if they're not a good fit, because you can kind of decipher that right away. So how do we hire the best talent? This is a very interesting topic that there's a lot of debate around of what employees are looking for. Do they care about pay? Do they care about vacation? We recommend absolutely, of course, being competitive in your area with the position and what other people are offering them. However, there are other elements you can use to get creative. So you can use vacation, for an example. Maybe you give them more vacation hours if that's what they really care about. If you can't match an exact dollar amount from an hourly rate, maybe you want to give somebody, again, more vacation time. You want to make sure that there is not a discriminatory thing against other employees of why they're not getting that much. But a lot of people use this as a tactic that we see for associate doctors. How do we get them to really, because that's a hard place to be hiring for right now. And so using more vacation, using more on the benefits side can definitely entice them. 401k, there are multiple states that are starting to roll out required 401k offerings. So if you're in Illinois, California, Oregon, couple others, if you're in those states, it's requiring you to start to offer 401k. And so that is helpful from a benefit to your employees. They are state offered programs though. And so one really cool thing is we are actually to handle this, because as laws change, our role as a company is to adopt these laws or be able to accommodate these laws for you. Is we've actually implemented a really competitive 401k offer. So if you're interested, please contact our team at HR for Health. Again, check if you're in an area that does require it for sure. But even if you're not, this is a great way to be competitive, is to offer 401k. More and more people are asking for that now. And last but not least, finding somebody that has the same values and goals as the practice. You can train skill, but you can't always train having the same values. And so it's really important to know, even if you really like a candidate, if somebody that's applying to this role is used to a structured day-to-day, doesn't like a lot of curveballs, and you have a startup, that's probably not a good fit for you. And so maybe keeping the resume on file and contacting them later is a better idea, but making sure they're a fit for the values and goals is really important. All right, so offers and background checks. So your offer letter, please make sure you're giving an offer letter every time you are extending an offer. The offer should outline things like start date, rate of pay, who their supervisor is, job title, practice address. It's nice to tell them where they should be going the first day, an at-will statement, etc. So the employee should sign the offer letter and you should retain a copy. A little tip here, we recommend adding a contingency statement to your offer letter if there's any factors that may affect their employment with you. So for example, like a reference check, putting in the offer letter, this offer is contingent on a successful reference check. Really important you're putting that on there if you're planning on doing any background checks, reference checks. Stating the working schedule is really honestly more important than most people think, because when you put the initial working schedule into the offer letter that they're signing and saying, yes, I can do this, not only is that providing clear communication, but it can also be used as a reference if the employee requests a schedule change that you cannot accommodate, especially if this is somebody that might be, again, going on disability or coming back from disability, coming back from maternity leave, workers' comp, where they are in these protected classes. If you're truly not able to accommodate their request, this is a good basis of, look, we agreed on this schedule and this is the schedule for the role. And the offer letter is a great way to reference that. Definitely have an at-will statement to ensure the document cannot be used as a contract for a guaranteed employment. So again, all these things we've talked about This is included in the offer letter that we give you that automatically sends to an employee if when you onboard them. So if you're an HR for Health client, you should be definitely taking advantage of this already. Let's talk a little bit about background checks. So background checks cannot be completed until after the offer is made, and you need to have the candidate's consent in writing. And there's a variety of background checks and tests that you can run on people. There's all these different types. You just, at the end of the day, want to be really cautious that there are laws that restrict what you can obtain and how you can obtain this information. And so you just want to make sure you're using a reputable background check company that knows the different ins and outs of how to do this. So we have a few that we can refer you to if you have questions, but definitely want to make sure you're doing that because the restrictions honestly have expanded significantly in recent years. And at the end of the day, you just want to make sure you're treating everyone equally because it is illegal to do a background check of applicants if the decision to do that background check is based on protected classes. So person's race, origin, sex, religion, disability. So if you're only asking those certain people for background checks, that can be evidence of discrimination. So make sure it's consistent across the board if you're going to be doing it. Again, that consistency can be all new hires, that consistency can be a specific role, but just make sure you're treating everybody the same. You have to tell the applicant that you're using the background check as a part of your decision-making process. So that's where it's really important to have that contingency in your offer. And you need to give them a separate authorization from your employment application to get that clearance to go ahead and run it. And then make sure you keep all that information on file for at least 1 year. There are other options besides background checks. One of that being reference checks. So I know on this call, we're already trying to find good people, and this stat might freak us out a little bit because like, great, there's no one good out there, but about 50 to 80% of resumes submitted contain false or inaccurate information. So we do want to make sure that we are running some sort of check on their references. This allows for us to verify information that they're providing on the employment application, that they're providing on their resume, just to make sure it's all kosher. And this can also provide information on like the candidate's skills, performance, work history, and it also can help protect you from claims of negligent hiring because it's like, no, I'm doing this, you know, I'm not keeping myself blind. I know exactly what I'm getting into with this person so that you don't have any of those claims. And just making sure to keep the questions job related. A lot of people have opinions on what you should ask or shouldn't ask. My opinion, asking, would you hire this person again, yes or no, kind of tells you everything you need to know. But if you are going to ask more questions than that, just make sure they're job related. Little bonus information on this too. We get asked all the time, what about checking social media? Or, you know, I can secretly Google them, right? It should be a clue to you that background check companies do not offer social media searches in their services because they reveal information you don't need to know. And so just don't do it. It's not a good idea. We've also had people who have asked us, you know, I saw they worked for my friend on their resume. Can I just call my friend behind the scenes? You still need that consent. It's really important that you're getting that consent from the employee, even if it's your best friend or it's your mom that they used to work for. Go through that formal process to get the reference check documented, especially if you do end up not hiring them. It's really important you have that. All right, onboarding. Let's go into our last poll. Kim, I'll kick it to you.
Okay, sounds good. All right, here we go. Last poll is, let's do, yeah, this is just a quiz. Let's see what they know. How many documents, wait, here we go. How many documents do your employees sign when they start with your practice? We have, did they just sign 2 to 3? Do they sign 4 to 7, 8 to 12, or 13 to 20? I'm excited to see how this one shakes out. Also, Jill, just so you know, we've got some fun questions when we're done. So we'll be getting to those soon. This is like neck and neck. Wow. All right, I'm going to cut this in just a minute. All right. Well, kind of across the board again here, 15% said 2 to 3 documents, 30% said 4 to 7 documents, 22% said 8 to 12, and our winner at 33% was 13 to 20 documents.
Awesome. That is really great news to hear. And as we go into our onboarding tips, we're going to talk about our new hire paperwork a little bit. But first and foremost, a couple tips. Creating a welcome kit for the team can be a really good idea. Coffee mug, a welcome sign, giving them a t-shirt. If you have those, you'd be surprised at how much of a difference that makes. It makes them feel really welcome. Creating a training plan for the first few weeks and providing that to the employee. This helps them to follow along and understand what you're looking for. What does their path to success look like? And also highlight on who they will be working with. Don't assume they know your team like you do. Make sure you're making those introductions. They know exactly who they're working with throughout their training process and what they're going to be working with them on, so that it helps to ease them into the culture of the practice. Mentoring is also a great idea, to assign the employee a mentor, because this helps grow both the mentor and the mentee. Also, this is something that sometimes it's easy for us to forget, but just communicating to the employee prior to them coming of what to expect when they arrive. Where do they go when they arrive? Where are they supposed to park? Those things that we overlook. If there's any new policies that COVID might have brought into place that they need to be aware of, just make sure they know what to expect on the first day and moving forward. All right, so onboarding and new hire paperwork so for all of you that answered C and D, great job. There are about 12 to 18 required forms per state. So this is for both federal, state specific, even cities have their own documents. And it's not only that these documents right now this many are required depending on where you are, but the documents are constantly changing because the laws are constantly changing. And so when a law changes, that might amend an existing document, or it's a new document altogether that has to come into play. And your documents need to be kept on file for at least 3 years post-employment. So it's really important to make sure that you're getting these documents filled out and signed by the employee on their first day, that you're giving them all the ones they need, and that you're keeping these on file during their entire employment and 3 years post-employment. So I mentioned earlier, it takes on average 54 administrative tasks to onboard employees, which is really crazy. And it kind of gets worse because that number doesn't include the 10 times you'll have to remind them to sign their paperwork, and the 3 times you'll show them to clock in, and the 100 don't forget to take your rest break nudges. So these are all things that you should be automating, hopefully on the first day of employment for them. So giving them a way to electronically sign their documents, or know exactly what documents they're supposed to fill out. What do those documents mean for them? And we don't want to just be giving them an I-9 and W-4. So I mentioned there's 12 to 18 that you have to have on average for every employee. And this is based on your state requirements and federal. So the I-9 and W-4 are not going to cut it anymore. They really haven't, but if you've gotten away with it this far, this is really the time to get those up to date. And the good news is you can use HR for Health as an excuse. If you're a client, you can just say, hey, we're all getting onboarded HR for Health, and all the new hire documents sent to them automatically, and you don't even have to worry about what those are because we maintain them, and they just fill them out and sign them. But it's really important, again, the employees are getting these on their first day because not only do you have legal requirements, but this is what they're expecting. They know that they should be getting all of this paperwork when they're onboarded. And again, in our system, we do give you what's mandatory, what's recommended, even informational ones. So we do go past that 12 to 18 of what we've seen as good practice. Our team maintains those, so you don't have to really worry about as something changes, we just update it. But the biggest thing is those are automatically sent to every employee and they fill it out and sign it so that you don't have to sit there, print anything out, wonder where that document went. They're just doing it in the system and it stores there for forever until you would like to download it or, whatever. But really they just stay in the cloud. It's a great place up there. So retention. This is really, really where it all comes together, right? Because we're onboarding these people to have this retention. And these pieces are really important because your employees want transparency and consistency. Remember, these are significant factors in retention. Employees care about what they're getting paid. Fourth out of 1, 2, and 3 are the things I've listed here. They want transparency. They want consistency. They want to know what's expected of them. They want to feel like they're contributing to something. And so if you can do that for them, it can really increase the likelihood that they're going to stay. And so introductory period reviews are a great way to start them off on their right foot. So these check-ins to see how their training's going, where they need more support is really important. And these check-ins should be documented. And that job description that we've been talking about so much should be used as that point of reference to build on the skills and lay out goals. So we're listing out in our job description all the expectations. Using that as a place to check in makes the conversation an objective conversation, not emotional, allowing to really lay their goals out for them and say, hey, you haven't hit this, this, and this yet. Also, an employee should know when they've hit their introductory period, and so should you. It's really easy. Time flies, man, when you're having fun. And so it's really important that they know when their 90 days is up or whatever you've decided that your introductory period is, and that you're acknowledging that, congratulating them. Hey, you've made it. Let's have a check-in, and making sure that that's documented. Clear expectations outlined in your handbook is really underestimated because this allows, the handbook is such a tedious process, or might feel like a tedious process, to continue to update it. And I totally get it. We all do. But this allows employees to not guess on what is expected of them. And I always say a handbook is not enough. You actually have to use the handbook. So that is where you're going to gain the credibility with the team on, hey, I'm saying these are my policies and I'm making sure I'm actually following through on that. So you can trust that I'm giving you clear expectations and I'm following through on those. And employees should be able to access these policies whenever they need to. So let's say they get summoned for jury duty. Nobody remembers what you're supposed to do when you get summoned for jury duty. Like, what you're supposed to do for the jury duty, but you're like, what am I supposed to do? Do I request that off? Is it paid? How do I tell my employer that I have it? And so making sure they have access to your policies so they can self-service on, this is what I'm supposed to do when I get jury duty, not only makes them feel more like they're in the driver's seat of their employment, but it also takes time off of your plate to having to say, oh, let me track down that handbook. So giving them transparency and access to all of their policies is really important. And if your policy says you're doing something, please make sure you're doing it. If your policy in your handbook for cell phone use says employees are not allowed to use their cell phone in front of patients, allowing your favorite employee, because they're your favorite employee, to still do it in front of patients because they're getting work done is the last thing you want to do, because it's creating hostility between team members, and it's also making your handbook pointless. So really using that is an important aspect, and it, again, shows the team, I'm consistent. I'm telling you this is how it works, and I'm making sure it works that way. And ongoing performance reviews and check-ins. We recommend, weekly having check-ins, brief one-on-ones. There's a lot of different structures for you to do that. At least one annual performance review that's kind of like the big to-do. Doing that on their anniversary, as opposed to doing, having everyone go through it at the end of the year. It just makes them all think they're going to get a big bonus check when you do that. And, it's a lot of time on your plate. So doing it throughout the year when they hit their anniversaries is a great option. And as a bonus to all this stuff, a great way to make your employees feel that you care about them is to pay them correctly. And that means paying them overtime correctly. Paying them on time. If your handbook policy, you want to be following your handbook policy. If it says we're going to pay you every other Friday, you've got to be paying them every other Friday, not just because it's compliant and you have to, but because it makes the employees think you take them seriously and you care about them. Even something as small as remembering their work anniversary or their birthday truly matters and really makes them feel special. Allowing them to see how much sick and vacation time they have available. I can't tell you how many doctors we see prior to working with us that have one thing in their handbook in terms of sick and vacation. But because there's no system in place to actually track it, nobody has any idea who has what. And it just makes more work, but it also creates that lack of transparency that we're talking about. And so this is just an example of what our system looks like. If you're an HR for Health client and you're not using this part of our features yet, please do it. It's a great way, again, to give transparency, to show the employee they can go in and see how many hours they have available. They can request it right there. And it creates that consistency for your handbook, because what you have written in your handbook is what will be right here. But it allows that transparency for the employee. It's a great self-service aspect. And it just makes the employee all around happier, because they feel a little bit more like they're in the driver's seat when it comes to their time off out of the office. And as a bonus, we hear all the time that employees fight over who requested time off first and they don't know. And maybe you're telling your favorite hygienist they can take time off, and your least favorite hygienist is always feeling that they're getting the short end of the stick. This allows a date and time stamp of when they submitted it, super objective, no more emotional conversation. So as we wrap up, another reminder, your employees are expecting this same experience at work as they are expecting as a consumer, whether they realize it or not. So they're looking for ease of use, for details on their employment, for transparency to their pay, to time off, to the handbook. This is all essential to have in one place in one system. So a handbook and HR advising are great, and that's something that we offer, included in everything that we do, but it's just not enough. That transparency of all their job descriptions, knowing if somebody clocked in late, if somebody clocked in early, are they working unapproved overtime? Is it time to do their performance review? Is it somebody's birthday? Wouldn't it be nice to get an email for that? As I've been, lecturing all day about, we got to show them they're appreciated. So all these things go into one system, and that ease of use really helps an employee with their day-to-day and their overall happiness. So as we wrap up, I want to show the texting again. So if you have not yet and you would like the list of interview questions and the new hire documents at the federal level, please text 44222 and text the word hiring tips to that number, and it will automatically send to you. So as we wrap up, Kim, I will pass it back to you. It seems like we have time for a few questions, which I'm excited to see them.
Yes, awesome. Thank you, Jill. That was so great. I can tell everyone has been really engaged, loving the information. So thank you so much. And let's see what we can get through quickly. Okay, can we email the application, or do they have to come in to fill it out?
Sure, you can absolutely email the application. You just want to have a way for them to fill it out easily. So again, thinking just from a applicant experience, if you email them something and maybe they don't have a PDF editor, and it's not, you don't probably want to email it in a Word document so they can't manipulate it. Just thinking that through, or maybe giving them instructions on, if you don't have a PDF editor, print it out. You can, write it down, scan it back. That's not too dumbed down. They don't know what you expect from them. They've never experienced it, So yes, you can email it. Just make sure it's an easy way for them to fill it out.
Great. Okay, that was from Tracy. Okay, this one is a little bit funny, although he says it's not a joke. Jim asks, how many missed days in a year is too much for an RDH? Is 42 too many? No joke.
So there is no law that says how many days are too many. So, the general answer would be it's whatever works for the practice. I do not know a practice that's fine with 42 days being missed the whole year. I also think there's definitely a difference between number of days that you're missing for vacation that are pre-approved versus not approved, just not coming in, no call, no show. And that's where it also goes back to, if they are no call, no show, that your handbook policy should have a policy about that. And then you should be holding them to that policy, because if you're not holding one person to it, how is the rest of your team going to take it seriously?
Mm-hmm. All right, great. And the questions are still coming in, so I just want to make sure everyone knows that if we don't get to them tonight, we promise we will make sure that someone emails you tomorrow. Also, Sounds like we've been having some problems with the 44222. Want to make sure that hiring tips is just one word, HIRINGTIPS, and you just text that to the number 44222. However, if that doesn't work, feel free to email me webinars@hrforhealth.com, and I will make sure to get you those documents. Okay, Jennifer says, how do you feel about asking the candidate, tell me a little about yourself?
I love that question. I think that what that person divulges then and what you document is what's important. You really want to keep things objective. But I think tell me a little bit about yourself. Where I would maybe make a little tweak is tell me about your resume, tell me about your experience, just to kind of direct your question a little more, because seriously, who knows what somebody could respond to that. And you're like, I didn't want to know that. So just to direct the question a little more, but absolutely, again, getting to know them for a culture fit is super, super important. So I'm not trying to scare anyone away from that. What we really don't want to do is just find out information that they are in a protected class that we're then making a decision based on that.
Okay. Is it mandatory to run a background check?
No, it's definitely not mandatory. At HR for Health, we don't always run background checks. We really only have for financial positions. And that was like even years ago, because the laws have changed a ton since then. We run reference checks. We feel that that's sufficient enough, but it really is to each its own. If you do want to run one, make sure you're doing it correctly, as I mentioned, using a reputable company. But if you're not doing a background check, I would recommend doing reference checks, doing something just to have that check and balance of, is what they're putting on their resume, is what they're giving me in this employment application, can I verify this? And just getting the references from them of who they would have, who they're authorizing you to call, and going from there is definitely a good idea.
Great. Okay. And I think you're going to say the same thing for this one, which is someone asked, what about drug testing, fingerprinting?
Oh, great question. Yes. So drug testing is a very interesting, this is again kind of to each its own. First of all, if you're going to drug test, you want to do this consistently, because if your favorite employee tests positive for something and your least favorite employee tests positive for something, you have to fire them both if you're going to fire one or the other. So knowing that going into it, again, why are you doing the drug test? And making sure it's consistent and that your decisions based on that are consistent is really important. Again, depending on what state you're in, there are aspects of recreational marijuana, for example, that have to kind of be taken into consideration. But for the most part, if you're going to do it, totally fine. Make sure you're using a good drug testing company that knows the employment laws and what they can disclose, and make sure you're consistent and you're prepared to make decisions for all of your employees if you're going to try to do it for one.
Good. I keep saying the last one, but what about, this is HR for Health specific. Can we edit HR for Health templates and documents under the new hire checklist?
Yeah, so there are certain documents that are just mandatory that no, because we don't have a say over that. The government just says this is what you have to give them. But yes, you can customize adding your own documents. If you wanted to use maybe like a different offer letter template than ours, you can, where that's not a mandatory document, that's just a highly recommended one. So yes, it depends what it is, but ultimately you can add your own. We recommend that. Honestly, we want to try to eliminate all paper. So anything you have on paper, we want to get that into the system and be able to use it.
All right. Well, thank you to everyone for asking questions. We will be giving you a replay of tonight. I know people were asking because there's so much good information. So you'll be getting an email tomorrow with a replay of this, and you can always reach out again at webinars@hrforhealth.com. Thank you again, Jill, and we hope we'll see you next time.
Thank you.